The desert sun burned high above the Zagros Mountains, casting long shadows across the jagged ridges that hid Iran's most guarded secret. Beneath layers of earth and reinforced steel, scientists worked tirelessly on what was codenamed Project Cimmerian, a nuclear warhead program designed not for deterrence, but for vengeance. The world remained unaware, but in the Situation Room of the Pentagon, something had shifted. Lieutenant Commander Ava Reyes stared at the satellite images projected across the room. Her sharp eyes tracked the contours of the mountain range and the red-ringed heat anomalies detected from infrared sweeps. A weapons specialist trained in unconventional payloads, Ava knew what she was looking at. She just didn't want to admit it. "We've confirmed the enrichment centrifuges are active," said General Halverson, his voice gravel and authority. 300 meters beneath this facility, deeper than anything we've seen before. Across the room, intelligence analyst Raj Patel flicked through data on his tablet. Thermal decay patterns suggest active isotopic refinement, plutonium, and they're accelerating output. Ava folded her arms, feeling a knot grow in her chest. If they go operational, Tehran could field a deliverable warhead within 6 months. "No," Halverson said, turning. 3. She glanced at the holographic display, the simulation of a blast radius stretching from Tel Aviv to the Suez Canal. Ava didn't blink. "Then we strike." And just like that, it was spoken aloud. In a lab outside Qom, Dr. Kamran Vaziri adjusted his surgical mask and stepped into the reinforced clean room. A physicist born into a nation at odds with itself, he once believed in energy, not weapons. But the revolution had other plans, and so did his government. Now, he oversaw the core assembly division of Project Cimmerian, a fact that gnawed at what remained of his conscience. His assistant, a young engineer named Amini, held up the latest readings. The implosion lens test passed, all within tolerances. Kamran nodded but didn't smile. "And the neutron initiator?" "Scheduled for calibration tonight." He dismissed Amini and sat at his console. The lab was silent except for the hum of filtered air. In the isolation of subterranean labs, guilt became a whisper you could tune out, but not tonight. He opened an encrypted terminal and typed a single line. "They know." At Langley, the transmission came in on a cold line reserved for the highest clearance assets. Ava was on a secure call within the hour. "You're telling me we've got an insider?" she asked, brows knitting. Patel nodded. "We believe so. The phrasing matches a former contact's style from 7 years ago, Vaziri. He dropped off our radar, assumed dead. Now he's warning us." Ava tapped her fingers on the table. "And what does Langley think?" "We think they're close, very close. The MOP is the only option. Operation Earth Punch." The phrase carried weight, not just because of what it entailed, but because of what it signaled. That diplomacy had failed. That something too deep to reach by missile alone needed the punch of 30,000 pounds of precision steel and explosive fury. Ava had trained on the platform, Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, but had never imagined it would be used in a real-world scenario. "You're flying in 12 hours, Halverson said as he approached her. "We'll launch from Diego Garcia. B-2 loaded and waiting." "And if intel's wrong?" Halverson didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, in a steel-framed war room half a world away, Major Caleb Dunn reviewed satellite targeting parameters with his crew. He was built like a linebacker and wore the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too many missions turn to smoke and fire. This time, the stakes were different. "You know what they're calling this?" one of his co-pilots asked. "God's sledgehammer." Caleb shrugged. "Let's just make sure we're swinging it in the right direction." Outside, the hangar doors opened. The B-2 Spirit bomber, sleek, matte, near invisible to radar, rested silently, its belly loaded with the most powerful non-nuclear weapon the U.S. had ever built. MOP was a warhead designed not to explode on contact, but to drill its way down like a metallic meteor, penetrating concrete, steel, and earth until it reached its target, then unleashing hell. Back underground, Cameron stared at the countdown clock above the reactor room. 47 hours until the system ran its first cold test. Then it would be only a matter of wiring the final initiators. He couldn't let it happen. He accessed the encrypted channel once more and composed a final message. You have one shot. The window is 43 hours. After that, it's buried too deep. It was the last thing he sent before destroying the device. In the morning light over Diego Garcia, Ava stood beside the aircraft, wind tugging at her flight suit. The pre-dawn air tasted of jet fuel and salt. Her mind wandered not to glory or medals, but to Cameron, the man she'd once debriefed, the man now risking everything to stop a war. The order came over her earpiece. Mission confirmed. Go time in T-6 hours. As the engines fired and the final checks were run, Ava climbed into the cockpit, eyes steeled. Somewhere beneath the crust of the earth, a weapon waited. And above it, fate hung in the sky. The world didn't yet know what was coming. But it would. The hum of the B-2's engines was barely perceptible inside the cockpit, yet Ava Reyes felt each vibration through the soles of her boots. The darkness above the Indian Ocean stretched infinitely, a black canvas streaked only by stars and HUD readouts. They were 30 minutes from drop point. Operation Earth Punch was no longer theoretical. It was airborne. Major Caleb Dunn adjusted course with robotic precision, his face lit by the green glow of instrumentation. We're approaching the envelope, confirming payload integrity. Ava checked her console. The Massive Ordnance Penetrator was armed and secured. 30,000 pounds of engineered devastation, sleeved in reinforced alloy, cradled within the bomber like a god coiled in slumber. Her heart pounded, not out of fear but anticipation layered with dread. Telemetry looks good, she said, voice steady. No radar ping. Their airspace net is blind to us, so far. Copy that, Caleb muttered. Let's keep it that way. On the other side of the world, buried beneath 300 meters of concrete and rock, Cameron Vaziri paced like a man trapped in a slow-burning fuse. He had triggered a protocol he could no longer stop. Sabotaging the reactor's power sequence had bought them time, hours, maybe less, before the engineers rebooted it. His encryption message would be the last transmission before internal security sealed the channel. He turned toward the observation window. Across the fusion lab, Amini was running tests, oblivious. Cameron admired the young man's brilliance, his ability to compute neutron velocity differentials in his head, to align microcontrollers with finesse. But he would never know the truth, that the facility he was helping to optimize had been built not to innovate, but to annihilate. A klaxon sounded. Emergency systems came online. Cameron blinked. That wasn't part of the schedule. He leaned toward his console, scanned the security feeds. A warning. Unregistered seismic activity detected 30 kilometers northeast. His breath caught. They were coming. Back in the air, Ava's HUD lit with the final clearance. 5 minutes to release, she announced. Her hands hovered over the trigger interface. The MOP's drop protocol required real-time calculations based on barometric pressure, target density, and predicted structural collapse. They would only get one shot. This feels too clean, she muttered. Too simple. Caleb didn't look at her. It's never clean. And it's never simple. The B-2 slipped into its descent vector. Outside, the Zagros range emerged under the moonlight, jagged, pale, ancient. The precise strike point had been fed into the bomb's guidance system, triangulated against underground vents and heat signatures. Below, in darkness, lay the heartbeat of Project Sumerian. Ava initiated countdown. 3, 2, 1, drop. The bomb detached, plummeting silently at hypersonic speed, slicing through the atmosphere with unyielding purpose. There was no explosion in the sky, no fireball, only a subtle shift in the plane's trajectory as it gained altitude again, a breathless silence as the Earth awaited impact. Then the ground beneath the Zagros range convulsed. Cameron staggered, clutching the wall as tremors cascaded through the facility. Lights flickered, power conduits snapped free, sirens wailed in multiple frequencies, engineers shouted in panic, oxygen seals disengaging. Somewhere, an overpressurized steam vent burst, releasing a superheated plume that melted the ceiling above a control terminal. He ran. Amini met him in the corridor. "What was that? An earthquake?" Cameron shook his head. "Not an earthquake." "You knew this was coming," Amini accused. "You sent a message." There was no time for denials. "Help me. We need to get to the core vault. We can shut it down manually." "But why?" "Because if we don't, the failsafe will engage." Amini's eyes widened. "The Abyss Protocol?" Cameron nodded. "It's not just a deterrent. If the system detects catastrophic loss, it triggers a retaliatory logic chain. The warhead isn't just a prototype. It's a trap." Above, Ava stared at the monitors. Shockwaves had registered. The heat map glowed red, then white-hot. Structural readings indicated collapse at multiple levels. But something wasn't right. The system's AI had flagged an anomaly, a pulse signature beneath the surface, not consistent with a nuclear reaction, but with some kind of live transmission, like a heartbeat, pulsing at steady intervals. "What is that?" she whispered. Caleb narrowed his eyes. "Unknown. Could be a backup reactor, maybe—" "No," Ava cut him off. "It's too rhythmic, too precise." Then the feed cut out. At the facility, Cameron and Amini reached the secure terminal, bypassing biometric locks. The Abyss Protocol was already active, counting down from 45 minutes. It had interpreted the MOP strike as an existential threat. If not interrupted, it would send launch signals to hidden drone silos embedded across the region. Not conventional missiles, but chemical payloads, bioweapons stored as contingency. Cameron entered the override code. Access denied. Amini's fingers flew across the keys. "It's using quantum encryption. The keys rotate every 4 seconds. "There's no way to break it in time," Cameron said. "We don't need to break it," Amini replied. "We need to confuse it." He rerouted the environmental sensors, feeding false data into the system, convincing the AI that the facility was still intact. Pressure normalized. Systems stable. Threat averted. The countdown froze. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, the core lights returned. Ventilation whirred to life. The protocol disengaged. Cameron slumped against the console. "You did it." Amini didn't answer right away. His hands were trembling. "We bought them time, but they'll try again." Cameron nodded slowly. "Then next time they need to know the truth. All of it." Ava stared at the updated feed. The pulse had stopped. The seismic readings faded into static. Operation Earth Punch had struck the heart, but it hadn't killed it. Not yet. But something had changed. The war had shifted underground, into code, into thought, into shadows cast by superweapons and decisions made in silence, and the question that haunted her now was not whether they had stopped a war, but whether they had started something worse. Under the dense veil of a moonless night, silence ruled the skies over the Gulf as the B-2 banked southward on its return trajectory. Ava stared into the black, her reflection barely visible on the curved cockpit canopy. She couldn't shake the stillness she felt. Not relief, not triumph, just silence. Operation Earth Punch had technically succeeded, but the victory felt like a phantom. Something in her gut whispered that it wasn't over, that it had never truly begun the way Command believed it had. At Langley, the secure servers lit up with an encrypted stream from an Iranian relay node. Analysts scrambled to decrypt it. When they finally did, the lines sent a chill through the entire command chain. It was Kamran. He had survived the strike, and he was warning them again. Project Cimmerian was never the end point. It was a diversion. Ava's briefing came before sunrise. General Halverson leaned forward, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. Our target was hollow, Commander. The heat signatures were staged. False lab data. Kamran confirmed it. There is another facility, mobile, possibly naval. A chill spread through Ava's spine. They wanted us to hit it. Halverson nodded slowly. They wanted us to think we stopped it. Meanwhile, in an isolated command chamber near the Caspian Sea, Admiral Soraya Jalali stood over a glowing control map. Her uniform bore no insignia, her title unspoken, her loyalty unquestioned. She had orchestrated the deception, anticipated the American response, and had already rerouted the real warhead components to a fleet of disguised research vessels. The decoy facility had served its purpose, to attract and absorb the wrath of the West. Kamran had been a liability, but not an unforeseen one. Amini, now under silent detention, refused to speak, even under pressure. He wasn't just a brilliant engineer, he was a patriot, caught in a storm larger than any flag or nation. The loyalty that once tethered him to ideals was now slipping. Kamran's betrayal had changed something fundamental. There were lines, he realized, even in total war. Across the ocean, Ava stood in front of a joint intelligence committee, laser pointer in hand. "We're not just tracking hardware anymore," she said. "We're chasing ideas, portable, encrypted, viral." "What's your assessment?" asked a senator. "That we're at the beginning of something designed to never end?" The war, Ava realized, wasn't measured in bombs dropped or bunkers collapsed. It lived in deception, in adaptive logic chains, in ideologies designed to outlast missiles. They hadn't destroyed Project Cimmerian. They had broadcast a signal to every nation watching, "We can survive you." And that meant retaliation would never be as simple again. At sea, one of the disguised Iranian research vessels powered up an experimental scrambler array. Beneath its decks lay the beginnings of a tactical warhead, assembled in fragments, concealed as medical cargo. Soraya stood at the helm, silent, composed. She understood what Kamran never had. It wasn't about the weapon itself. It was about the story the weapon told. Ava returned to her quarters that evening and stood before her, mirror in stillness. She'd flown the mission that had nearly started a regional war. She'd pulled the trigger on what the world now debated as a necessary escalation. And yet somehow she felt more uncertain than ever. The silence in the sky had returned, and the war below had just evolved.